Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Cooking for the Family. I'm Devon and this is my channel. I am so excited to share with you how to make incredible meatloaf. It is so good, y'all. I cannot wait to share this recipe with you. And do me a favor, if you are new here, go on and hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. And you know what? Go on and click that notification bell so that way you will not miss out on anything that I am doing in this kitchen. So these are the ingredients for our incredible, I cannot believe it's this good meatloaf. I'm going to show you the secret to great tasting moist meatloaf. You ready? Let's get started. Now first we're going to be using 1 celery stalk. I have washed my celery stalk. I've also taken off any of the brown parts or brown pieces that were on the end, and I'm going to go on and chop them up. We want to dice them up kind of small so that way they can really blend into the meatloaf. Now guys, let me tell you, I did not always put celery in my meatloaf, but over the years of being married, and I've been married 26 years, and over the years of being married to my husband, I have made some not so great meatloaf. But I found that using celery and using onion, and we're going to show you what we do, because we're not just going to add it in to our meatloaf. We're going to do something to this first prior to adding it into the meatloaf, okay? But I'm going on and I'm going to dice up our celery. I'm also going to dice up our onion as well. Now for our onion, we will be using a 1/2 cup of diced onions. Now I'm using a brown onion. However, you can also use a white onion. That will work very well in this recipe. But you want to avoid using a red onion. You want to avoid using a sweet onion. You don't want to use those in your meatloaf at all. Okay, so you want to stick to either using a brown onion or a white onion. We're using a 1/2 an onion, and once we have it diced up nice and small, it's basically going to give you about a 1/2 cup of diced onions. All right. Now once we have our onion and our celery is diced up and I've placed them in my bowl, we're going to go on and use a little bit of butter in a skillet, and I'm using a cast iron skillet, but you can use any skillet or pan, is fine. And I'm using 1 tablespoon of butter. And this is salted butter, but you can use salted or unsalted butter. Either one will work fine. And what I'm doing is I'm going to actually saute the onion and the celery. This is going to help them to become nice, tender, and soft. So that way it's not crunchy once you add it into your meatloaf, that it really just helps to enhance the flavor of your meatloaf. It really gives it a nice just feel when you're eating it, but you don't have that harsh onion overtones in your meatloaf, but just that subtle flavor will be in there. So that's why it's important that you want to saute your onion and your celery, and we're just going to do it until the onion is nice and translucent and the celery is also nice and soft to the touch. Okay, so not till they're mushy, but just kind of soft to the touch. And as you see here, I'm just going to do it. Now you don't want to have your fire on high, because you do not want to brown or caramelize your onions in any way. That will actually give your meatloaf a different kind of a flavor. So you want to avoid doing that and just gently saute them over like a medium heat is fine. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just sauteing my celery and my onions, and then we're going to go on and add it right back in. Any juice, any butter that's also in our pan, we're going to go on and also add that right in there with our meatloaf. Alrighty. And this is the end result of what we're looking for with our celery and our onion. They have expelled some of their juice. They are nice and soft. And so now it is time. Let's go on and add it right in there to our bowl. Now once we have our onion and celery added in there to our ground beef, I'm going to go on and I'm going to use my wooden spoon and I'm just going to mix everything in. Later on, I'm going to go in there with my nice clean hands and I'm going to really mix the meatloaf in with the other spices that we're going to add. But for right now, I just want to go on and start to mix in the celery and the onion. I'm adding in 1 egg. And I'm also going to add in my breadcrumbs. Now, I am using seasoned breadcrumbs, and this is Italian seasoned breadcrumbs. But trust me, your meatloaf will not come out tasting like a giant Italian meatball. It will not. But these breadcrumbs are so good in making meatloaf. Okay, now my seasonings, I'm using 1 tablespoon of Lawry's seasoning salt. Okay, and I'm using half a teaspoon of garlic salt, and I like to use the garlic salt that has a little bit of parsley in there, and so I'm using half a teaspoon of garlic salt. Now, after I've added my garlic salt, I'm going to go on and use some fresh cracked pepper. Now, if you don't have any fresh cracked pepper, you can use regular black pepper, and I'm using 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. You just need a little bit. So 1/4 of a teaspoon in this recipe works just fine. And so once I have my fresh cracked pepper that I have added into my meatloaf, now we're going to go on, and once we have all of our seasonings in there, we're going to start mixing. Now there is going to be one other ingredient that we will add, and that's going to be 1/2 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. You want to use kosher salt. And you want to use kosher salt and not table salt, okay? Now also, I almost forgot, parsley flakes. And I like to put in a few dashes of parsley flakes, and it basically boils down to about 1/4 of a teaspoon of parsley flakes. And the parsley flakes, what it does is it's just that little extra something that's in there, okay? Now this right here that I just put in, that's the secret ingredient. The secret ingredient is water, y'all. I put in 1 cup of warm water. Now, I'm going to tell y'all, several years ago, I saw a chef add water to his lean ground beef when he was making hamburgers. And he said that he did it to keep the lean meat from being dry after cooking it. So I thought, if he could add it to his hamburger patties, I can add it to my meatloaf. Maybe that will finally help my meatloaf to be moist. Y'all, this is a game changer right here. Trust me. And so now what I'm doing is I've mixed up my meatloaf. I've got everything all nice and blended. But there is one ingredient that I still need to add, okay? And I kind of like to actually add that a little bit at this point, and that is 1/2 a teaspoon of kosher salt. And as you see, I got my hands in there, and like I said, I got nice clean hands, and you want to get into your pot just like that with the bowl. And I like to mix it around, make sure everything is mixed nice and good. And I start to just kind of feel my meatloaf. My meatloaf is feeling soft. My meat does not feel tough at all. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually using an 88-12. So an 88% to 12% fat. So this is a pretty lean meat. You can also use an 80-20, but this 88-12, I really like it. It works well. So I have my casserole dish. I have gone on and formed. I'm going to form my meatloaf in the shape of a loaf of bread, but I don't want it too high, because what I found is that if it is too high, if it's too thick, it will take longer to cook, and that will also tend to dry it out. And so I kind of mush it down a little bit, and I pat it down, and I make sure that it's, I don't like to really have too much of the celery or the onion sticking out. So I just kind of will poke down any little celery or onion that I see, and I just formulate it like that. This is also something. Do not let your meatloaf touch the sides of your pan. Okay. And now the second thing that I do is I put a little water in my pan when I am baking my meatloaf. I just put it just about 1/3 of the way up the side of the meatloaf. And so that way, actually, as my meatloaf is baking in the oven, it is actually baking kind of like in a little bit of a water bath that also helps to keep it nice, moist, and tender. I'm going to top it classically with some ketchup. I have also in the past made my meatloaf, and I have not topped it with ketchup, and I've just made some real good homemade brown gravy on the side, okay? And I'll share that recipe with you in the future. And this is it, guys. Doesn't that look beautiful? That is some beautiful looking meatloaf. We have baked our meatloaf for 1 hour at 375 degrees. In the description box below, I will have the list of ingredients that we use for this incredibly delicious, game-changing meatloaf. Well, guys, I hope you give this recipe a try. And do you see that? Do you see how moist that meatloaf is? This is the classic American comfort food. And I have paired it with some homemade mashed potatoes and a vegetable medley. Well, that's it, guys. I thank you so much for stopping by my channel, and it is always good when Devon is cooking for the family. And if you haven't yet, go on and hit that subscribe button. I'll see you later.